Case 1. The serial killer who picked a 70-year-old victim. Let me start with one of the most chilling predators in American history. His name was Gary Hilton, and he was a serial killer operating along the Appalachian Trail in the Southeast. We're talking about a man who had murdered multiple hikers across multiple states, a calculated, intelligent predator who had already claimed numerous victims. By 2007, Gary Hilton believed he was invincible. He'd successfully targeted isolated hikers for years. He had a system, he had experience, he had a proven track record of getting away with murder. In his mind, he was unstoppable. Then he encountered Phyllis Zioni. She was 70 years old. Now, put yourself in Hilton's head for a second. A serial killer evaluating potential targets sees an elderly woman hiking alone on a remote trail. What does he think? Easy target, right? Someone slower, someone weaker, someone who couldn't possibly fight back, someone who would be the perfect victim. This was his fatal miscalculation. When Hilton attacked Phyllis Zioni, something unexpected happened. This 70-year-old woman fought back. And I mean, she fought with everything she had. Her fingernails dug into his skin. She resisted. She scratched him. She left evidence everywhere. Yes, ultimately, Hilton's predatory experience and brutality overcame her. But in that struggle, in those precious seconds where she refused to be an easy victim, Phyllis Zioni changed everything. She left behind DNA evidence, traces under her fingernails, defensive wounds, blood, skin cells, physical proof that connected this serial killer to his crimes. Gary Hilton didn't realize it in that moment, but he just made a catastrophic mistake. One woman's desperate struggle would unravel his entire operation. Investigators matched that DNA. They connected him to 7 murders across multiple states, 7 victims he'd targeted over the years. And every single one of those cases was strengthened by the evidence left behind by a 70-year-old woman who refused to be victim number 7 without a fight. Today, Gary Hilton sits on death row in Florida. He's been convicted of 7 murders. 7. And it all traces back to the DNA evidence left by Phyllis Zioni, a woman he thought would be easy, a woman he thought he could control, a woman who proved to be his absolute worst nightmare. One victim's courage stopped a serial killer's reign of terror. One woman changed the outcome of her own case. That's the power of refusing to be a passive victim. Case 2, the burglars who broke into a bodybuilder's house. Now, let's jump ahead to 2011 in Australia. A gang of burglars conducts what they believe is perfect reconnaissance. They identify a quiet suburban home. The owners seem to have money. Security looks minimal. It seems like the ideal target for an easy robbery. Here's what they didn't know. The homeowner was a former military serviceman, and not just any soldier. This man was a competitive bodybuilder. We're talking about someone whose physique was built through years of dedicated training, someone whose military background had prepared him for combat, someone whose physical capability was elite. But the burglars had no way of knowing that. They only saw what appeared to be an easy mark. When those doors came crashing down, everything the criminals expected shattered in an instant. Because instead of a frightened homeowner scrambling to comply, they encountered a trained combatant in peak physical condition. Someone who didn't run. Someone who didn't hide. Someone who fought back with the intensity of someone with military training and the power of an elite athlete. What happened next was absolute chaos. The burglars found themselves in a fight they never trained for. They weren't prepared for a homeowner who would fight back. They weren't equipped to handle someone more dangerous than they were. They suddenly switched from being the aggressors to being the victims, and they knew it. During the violent struggle, one of the burglars was fatally injured. The others fled. They abandoned their injured colleague. They abandoned their entire operation. They ran because they finally understood the truth. They had picked the absolute wrong house. This case teaches us something brutal. Criminals evaluate targets from a distance. They see what appears to be an easy score, but they rarely account for what's actually inside. This homeowner's military training and physical capability transformed him from intended victim to survivor. And those burglars learned the hard way that some homes aren't soft targets. One burglar didn't survive the encounter. The others faced serious charges, and a man successfully defended his home against violent criminals. That's what happens when you pick the wrong victim. Case 3. The taxi driver who refused to surrender. Armed robbery of taxi drivers is a persistent crime problem. Think about it from a criminal's perspective. Taxi drivers are ideal targets. They work alone. They work irregular hours. They're isolated. They have limited backup. It's a predator's dream scenario. But in one late-night robbery, two armed men made a critical mistake. They targeted a taxi driver who had something that most criminals don't account for: the will to fight. When those weapons came out and the demands were made, most people would comply. Most people would say, "Take the money. I value my life more than my earnings." That's the rational calculation. That's what most people do. This driver made a different choice. In a split-second decision, a moment of pure desperation and determination, he chose to fight. He chose to battle two armed men for control of his livelihood, his safety, his dignity. And what followed was an absolutely brutal struggle. The gun changed hands repeatedly. The fight was desperate and violent and intense. Two armed criminals fighting against one man with nothing but his will to survive. But something happened that these criminals didn't anticipate. They lost control of the situation. In the violent struggle for the weapon, one of the armed robbers was fatally wounded by his own gun. The second robber fled. He abandoned his dead partner. He left behind evidence. He faced serious criminal charges. And the taxi driver? He survived. He was injured. He was traumatized. But he was alive. He made a choice in a moment of crisis that saved his life. He proved that desperation can transform ordinary people into formidable opponents. That's the power of refusing to surrender. Case 4, the elderly homeowner who was anything but helpless. Here's one of the most dangerous assumptions criminals make. They see someone elderly and immediately categorize them as vulnerable, weaker, slower, unable to fight back. Easy. An elderly resident in their 80s became the target of a home invasion. The criminals saw the age and made their calculation. Easy target, straightforward operation, minimal resistance. They were catastrophically wrong. What these criminals didn't know was that this homeowner had decades of military training. Not recent training, we're talking about skills learned years ago, decades ago. But here's the thing about military training. When it's internalized deeply enough, it doesn't disappear. It sleeps. And when awakened by threat, it responds. When those doors came down, something incredible happened. Muscle memory that had been dormant for years suddenly activated. Combat reflexes that had been honed in youth came flooding back. What happened next was a fierce struggle between two younger, violent intruders and an elderly homeowner whose training, determination, and survival instinct proved absolutely overwhelming. One of the invaders was fatally wounded, the other scattered. This elderly resident had successfully defended their home, their safety, and their life against violent criminals who made the fatal assumption that age meant weakness. And here's what's important about this case. We live in an era where people stay active much longer than previous generations. Some people in their 70s and 80s have been training in martial arts for decades. Some retain physical capabilities that completely defy stereotypes about aging. Case 5, the convenience store clerk. A man walks into a convenience store late at night. He has a gun. He demands money. Everything about the scenario seems perfect for an armed robbery. The victim is alone. The workspace is confined. The criminal has weapon superiority. The clerk behind the counter appears to be just another worker, just another person making minimum wage, just another easy victim. Except this clerk was nothing like what the robber expected. This clerk had military service. This clerk had boxing training. This clerk had years of martial arts experience. None of these credentials were visible from behind the counter. None of them were apparent from a casual observation. But they were there. When the gun came out and the threats were made, everything changed in an instant. The fight was violent, swift, and absolutely conclusive. The armed robber ended up dead. The clerk survived. Now here's the pattern that ties all 5 of these cases together. Here's the shocking truth that every single one of them reveals. Criminals made assumptions. They profiled victims based on appearance, based on age, based on job title, based on location. And every single time, those assumptions were wrong. The bitter irony? These criminals set out to take something from their victims. But what they got instead was a fatal lesson about underestimating people. Share this video with someone you know who loves true crime. Hit that subscribe button, because we cover real cases like this all the time. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. And remember, sometimes the worst mistake a criminal can make is picking you.